Yo, hey guys, Weeks here, back with another video. This is going to be a guide for a Burning Rage character I've been playing. So this character has had quite the evolution. It started as I just wanted to play a forge farming character that could hopefully stand still and just kill things. It's evolved quite a bit over time. What the build looks to do is I originally wanted it to use Thornbite Rune to just get a bunch of shield. So I wanted to stack a bunch of defenses, and so this is an evasion stacking build that we convert to armor, that we convert to belly resist, that we just get as much of those stats as possible, which would give us a lot of shield, would be really tanky. Because the issue with trying to stand still is you need something that deals damage when you're not just um, actively playing the game, pressing your buttons. So wanted to use Burning Rage because it's an aura, and if we scaled the size, we could kill things hopefully all over the screen. That didn't quite work out that way, just because you can't get enough area size. Also recently they changed some of the epic stats that are possible to get, so we actually have less area size than we did before, but it's okay. We are using Rain of Arrows to pull enemies to us, and then they get hit by our aura, which kills them that way. It's not quite as AFK that way, but you also could literally just stand still and wait for things to come to you um, and burn up in your aura. So that's the idea of the build. There are some other iterations. Burning Rage is a little awkward because it's not a hit, or it is a hit, but it's not a direct hit, I guess, because it doesn't benefit off of Life Leech or Mana Leech or Life on hit or Mana on hit. You also can't do Ancestral Strike abilities because it's not a primary or a secondary skill. So there was a problem with trying to even activate the Thornbite rune. But recently they fixed some of the loops that happen when you stack evasion, stack mana, stack armor, stack all these things. What would happen is it would just keep looping and it would go on forever. You may have seen some builds of people doing that. But yeah, they fixed it so it doesn't loop anymore. So I originally was using the Ferocious Affinity Primordial Reaper because it converts 15% of your mana into Ellie damage, and that seems like a great way to get damage for the build, because before you were stacking evasion from the Huntress, your evasion gives you flat mana, and then we were going to use that huge amount of flat mana we had, scale it up with percent mana and max mana multiplier, have as much mana as possible, and then take 15% of that and put that to our Ellie damage, and then bam, we have damage for our Burning Rage skill. Again, it's not quite how this build turned out, just because we actually are using the Evasion Reaper now, and it's very strong, even without the looping. So that's the history of the build. I'm showcasing some gameplay here, and let's get into actually breaking down everything and explaining how this build works. Okay, so trying to talk about the overview of this build. It's going to be a little difficult because there's a lot of pieces that all work together. We basically use every single thing in this build, and we convert it or use it in some kind of way with some unique, and it all comes together to make this build, which is probably the strongest build I've ever played because it's basically immortal. If you want to go with shields, you can go for huge shields very quickly and swap your rune to something else. You can build up a bunch of shield and then swap to different Reapers to level up the Reapers. You can basically AFK with it. There's a lot of pros to this build. I haven't used it much for expeditions, but you can use it in expeditions because it's the same thing. I just normally, if I'm going to expeditions, I'm using the gold farm version of the Huntress. But anyway, let's talk about the key cornerstones of the build. So, for one, we have the Reaper. So this is the Reaper I ended up using. I was looking at Ferocious Affinity, both the primordial versions. So Ferocious Affinity is the one on the right. It would give you Ellie damage equal to 15% of your max mana. So here, I mean, it says it's, 71,000 Ellie damage. And the Reaper on the left, this is the Evasion Reaper is what I call it. It gives you flat evasion, percent evasion, evasion multiplier, and then you also get evasion equal to your minimum raw damage, which will come into play. Again, we use everything on this build. The Primordial Benediction gives us flat evasion. Evasion is based on your Ellie damage. Again, we use everything on this build. And yeah, that's all that really matters with the Reaper. So what are we actually doing? So we are now scaling evasion. We are getting evasion from minimum raw damage. And we're getting evasion from Ellie damage. So we go into the actual Huntress. On the totem, there is this key here, which gives you flat mana equal to 100% of your evasion. So as we scale up evasion, we're going to get a lot of max mana. So that's how we're getting this crazy amount of max mana, even though this claims to give us more. Not really sure what's happening there, but I assume it's something to do with the looping that isn't looping anymore, but this is the wrong number. So anyway, it still gives you a ton. Another thing that comes into play is this one here. This gives you elemental resist. Elemental resist is equal to 68% of your LE damage. So again, as we get LE damage, we get evasion, and then the LE damage also gives us LE resist. And then the minimum damage also gives us evasion. It's a lot. It's a lot of little things are going on here. Also in the ancestral tree, we are doing elemental lock. So we get LE damage equal to 65% of your mana lock. And we're mana locking with Burning Rage and with Air Conditioner. So that's what's going on here. We have some amount that is locked, and that is giving us LE damage. That LE damage is being converted. Another thing is this chest piece here. So this gives us flat armor. Armor is equal to 100% of my evasion. So as you stack evasion, this will give you that as armor. You go into the attributes. We're going to use this here. It gives us flat LE resist. LE resist is equal to 25% of your armor. So all of this together is what culminates into having all of this defense and all of this elemental damage. So with all of that said, this is the build. We also use the Rune of Ferocious Affinity because when this procs, you get raw damage equal to 6% of your max mana. So when this activates, my mana, or my raw damage is going to give me a ton of, my max mana is going to give me a ton of raw damage, which is going to give me a ton of evasion, which is going to give me a ton of mana, which I'm losing myself, but it all just keeps scaling and you get a ton of LE damage at the end along with all of these. It's probably better to just show it. So we'll jump in real quick and just kind of show what happens when you activate this rune. So another thing, we're using Rain of Arrows and Arrow Shot, basically because they can apply poison, and poison works with the Soul Eating Mantle. So if you stack up things that have millions of health, you'll still be able to kill them in the same amount of time because it does a % of their max health every time. And we have poison. We have the burning from Burning Rage. So it's 2 dots. And then also using this rune, we get a 3rd dot. So it's going to be 3 of these % max HP per tick. So currently it's 12.6 per tick and everything dies, in that amount of time. All right, so we activated the rune now. If we go back to our stats, we see it's jumped up a lot. We have 1.5 million LE damage now. Our mana is 1.6. Our evasion is 7.5 mil, armor 14.6, and elemental resist 5.3. So you get a ton of stats just by using these things. If we switch to the Thornbite, we would be getting 4 million shield. This is a little skewed because the other one was active. So we'll see how much we actually get real quick. All right, we get 1.2, which should be the correct tooltip. Yeah. I don't know. Whatever. Some of the tooltips are weird. I'm not sure if all of them are doing the correct numbers, but I'll let it proc one more time just to see. We got 1.2 the first time. All right, yeah, it seems pretty consistent there. Anyway, we'll keep talking about the build. So that's what's going on. We're also using a 3rd aura. This one doesn't block mana, so we don't get extra damage from it, but it scales with all of our stats. So this makes it enemies within a 12.8 yard radius have 34% reduced damage, and they have 120% attack speed. So let's quickly talk about the stats. So I don't get any movement speed stats on my gear. I'm just using the ultimatum. I've switched between mana regen ultimatum and area damage ultimatum depending on how much defense I had. But now that you have enough defense, you don't take any damage. I just go for movement speed. You also could go for mana regen if you're having mana regen issues. So actually talking about the stats on the gear and the gear itself. So we have our helm here. This is a unique, so it gives us a 57 max mana multiplier at plus 16. All of our gear is plus 16, plus 14. You can do this with less gear. I'm also using pure stats just to get the extra oomph because I was using legacy gear from beta and I was rolling those away, but I was like, I should use pure stats at some point and just keep upgrading the pure stat gear. And here we are, which they tried to make these pieces of gear legacy with epic stat change, but I've rolled those away now. So here is what's currently obtainable in the game, not legacy or anything like that. So anyway, we have flat AoE damage, we have plus evasion. Both those are good for us. Every time we can get area increase effect, area increase size, or aura increase effect, we do. I'm also getting elemental penetration 100% just cause I didn't know what else to get. I'm also getting 100% tenacity, so we never get slowed or snared or frozen or anything like that. It just makes it very smooth while hanging out in the forge. Next, we have our shoulders. Unique effect is max Reaper damage multiplier. This doesn't even really do that much anymore because we have so much damage that increasing the max Reaper damage isn't that big of a deal. We get a lot of it just from having evasion, having mana lock, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, same kind of stats. Ellie damage, evasion, percent evasion, mana, percent Ellie resist, percent mana, tenacity. Next up, this just helps with our crit on our skills, including Burning Rage. We're also doing a pure stat for critical strike chance, just to try to get as much critical strike chance as possible. Evasion, Ellie damage, critical strike damage, Ellie pen. I have one stat of life on kill. I want to test this out. So we have 100% reduced damage from our armor and 100% reduced damage from our Ellie resist, but somehow we still take damage. And it seems like the only damage we take is from ice bombs. I'm not exactly sure. Most of the time it's around 5 to 10 damage, sometimes like 20 damage, but I've taken as high as like 2k damage from an ice bomb, and it's not every ice bomb. So I don't think there's any inherent penetration to ice bomb. I'm not sure what's going on with ice bomb. But yeah, you will take some damage from that. So I'm having some life on kill just so it'll, heal me back up without me having to do anything. Next up, we have our gloves. So the cooldown time is really just for Rain of Arrows. We're using a rune on Rain of Arrows that pulls everything to us. So it just helps attack that much faster. Critical strike damage, flat evasion, critical strike chance, area, percent Ellie damage, tenacity. Same kind of stats over and over again. Percent evasion, critical strike damage, area, or aura effect, area, critical strike chance. And this gives us +1 on our Ancestral Legacy, which I don't even think we're using any of those. But let's see. Oh, this one has 1, so actually we are very good there. We don't use this skill at all. And then that's our Burning Rage. Okay, next is the boots. So I just went for plus evasion boots when I was trying to roll them at the vendor, but got one that also had max life. So here we are. You don't need the max life because we don't take any damage. So I don't value max life currently. Maybe in the future, something will be nerfed about this build and I'll want some max life. This is one place I would get some max life. I would get some other max life, maybe on the chest piece or something. But anyway, if the build gets nerfed or whatever happens to it, I'll do an update video if it's not completely gutted. But here we are. All right, yeah, same stats again. Has the burning. The burning synergizes with damage over time for Soul Eating Mantle. Next, I'm using this ring. Don't know how to say the name. Easy Docs. Handy me, whatever. Anyway, same kind of stats. Max mana, aura, critical strike damage, area, critical strike chance. And this has a poison effect that has a 5% chance for every previous tick to spread to another enemy. So it just helps spread poisons. Sometimes enemies can have multiple poisons if this ticks. And I didn't mention it earlier, but this here gives your arrow shot, rain of arrows, and void arrow. And immortal arrow apply poison. So we're mainly just going to be using this skill, rain of arrows. We're not going to use arrow shot at all. We'll talk about why we have arrow shot. It's just for this delighted here. So if you only cast one skill, you're going to be delighted. And this will give us this 25% evasion multiplier. Probably don't need this. We probably have enough stats where we don't even need it at this point, but it is what it is. You could switch the skill to whatever you want. I used Rain of Arrows simply because you can reduce the travel time and you can pull in enemies. So we'll talk about these more in detail. Also with the Delighted, you get more attack speed, which just helps you pull in enemies faster. So that's the overview of the skills really, but we'll do a deeper dive in a second. Let's finish out our pieces of gear. So that was the ring. Next up, we're doing the belt. We already talked about the aura. We're going aura effect, critical strike damage, area increase size, area increase effect, play pin, and tenacity. Same thing here. Aura, area, critical strike chance, max mana, tenacity. So that's how we get our 100% tenacity or 100% LE pin. Again, evasion, armor, LE resist, and then the 3 aura modifiers. We talked about the chest earlier. It gives you armor equal to your evasion. Very good. Also, if you get hit, you get an additional amount. So this will increase. And then lastly, we have our amulet. This makes our Reaper damage is added to LE damage instead of skill damage. So just a little bit more damage. So we have LE damage roll at the top, area increase size, critical strike chance, area increase effect, or increase effect, and LE pin. And if we look at our actual stats after all of that, you see these defensive stats here, 450 LE resist with our mana lock going, with our rune not active. Our max life is only 5.1k. We're not looking for any of these others. I'm getting life on kill, 130. Mana regen, I'm just using the base of 84, which you will run out of mana, especially if there is the shadow ground effects and if you're spamming Rain of Arrows because it costs more than 84. But we'll talk about that. You can always switch the ultimatum to this one and you'll sustain. Next tab, we aren't going for attack speed, but you could fit attack speed in either some epic stats, or if you would rather, use Rain of Arrows more, you can find some attack speed somewhere in there. Next up, trying to get as much crit as possible, so we get 64% critical strike damage. We're also trying to get as much as possible, so we got 432%. The Ancestral Strike and damage is just the baseline. Well, the baseline plus a little bit from this, but we're not actually trying to get Ancestral Strike chance because it only works on your, I think it says it. Yes, it only works on critical damage from skills in your primary and secondary slots. So you can't actually use Ancestral Strike, which makes it to where our activation rune is just killing enemies instead. I get 100% LE pin just in case an enemy has any elemental resist. They now have none. You could also go for LE damage instead, or sorry, damage to elites instead, or something like that. But this is what works for me. So 100% tenacity, just don't want to get knocked back or snared or any negative movement effects. You could look at all damage reductions, but again, we don't take any damage besides from Ice Bomb, so we don't even care to go for that. Last page, anything else? We don't use projectiles. Oh, our area of effect. So we have 220 area of effect. We have 134% area increase effect, and then we have 322% aura increase effect. So we briefly mentioned the Ancestral Legacy. We'll just talk about it again real quick. Air Conditioner, Elemental Lock. So this just locks all of that mana we get, and we get a bunch of LE damage. We don't use this at all, but it's the only way to get to Burning Rage. And then Burning Rage, the main way we do damage. So that's Ancestral Legacy. Let's talk about the other rune. So I'm using an activation rune for Astorius, which is killing enemies. So we killed 29.4 enemies. That's going to activate our rune for the shield. Otherwise, I'm using the Ferocious Affinity rune, which gives us a third dot, which again synergizes with the Soul Mantle. And then it also gives us that raw damage, which synergizes with the Reaper, and it gives us a bunch of damage from all the conversions. And then I'm using the Enhancement rune of Astorius, which just reduces the constraint of the effect rune. So these two together, it's 63 kills. With the Thorn Bite, it is 29 kills, 30 kills. So that's the runes. Let's talk about the attributes real quick. So toughness, really going to here to get the LE damage based off of our armor. These points you don't need, but it was easy 10 armor, but you can take out these 5 points here. For Fury, I'm going for the critical strike chance, so we get 10 by going for these points here. And then I'm going for this critical strike damage for each enemy within a 2-yard radius. So this only helps if enemies in the forge, there's just a ton of them. So you get extra damage. So it's pretty nice. And the evasion, again, scales with everything. These 3 points you can put wherever. So it's 8 points that can just go wherever. Zeal, we're getting some max mana. But ideally, we're just going for the aura increase effect here. 8% and 10%. So 18% there. Max mana does help, but it's not a big deal. And then next, we have willpower. So this gives us LE damage, some percent max mana, which is nice. Area increased size, which is what helps with our burning rage and other abilities. Like the rain of arrows also scales, so it just pulls basically the whole screen to you. But these points here, you could also get rid of them. So this is when you get hit, you get 35% LE resist multiplier. So this will just go up by 35%. But even at baseline, we're at 100%, so you don't really need it. So there's another 5 points I can go anywhere. So I've messed around with some different configurations with these points. So you have 13 points you can put wherever. I tried doing this for the 25% extra Reaper damage, but it really doesn't change much at all. So it doesn't feel correct. You could go here for the extra movement speed, but I ended up using the ultimatum that gives me movement speed, so that's not very good. You could go here for the Reaper damage and some attack speed. Ultimately, there's really just nothing to go after, so I kept going for this just in case this ever mattered. Maybe in the forge you get hit by a light beam and your LE resist is reduced, and this gets you back up to 100%. Not really sure, but whatever. It's negligible. It's a very small amount, so we'll just put them back here. And then usually where I can, I go for flat evasion. There is some percent evasion over here, but it's way too much investment to get, so I don't go for that. But that could be something, maybe something to keep on the horizon when they increase the level cap or something like that. We'll see. So that's attributes. What else do we need to talk about? So we got a Reaper, our runes, our gear, our stats, our ultimatum, our attributes. Is that it? Oh, let's talk about our skills. So again, talking about our skills, this is the important one. This gives us flat mana base of our evasion. Not sure what's up with the tooltip, but it is what it is. This here gives us 35% area increased size. This here doesn't matter. You can pick any one you want. This one gives us 25% evasion, or sorry, 25% LE damage. Not a big deal, but it is damage. This one gives us poison, so that synergizes with our soul mantle. It just helps us kill really tanky enemies. Next, another important one. This gives us a bunch of LE resist, almost 100k flat LE, and that's just based off our LE damage. This row doesn't matter. There's nothing to do here. You could do the turret syndrome cooldown, but we don't actually use that ability. I will talk about this ability for a second because it is something I've thought about by using this, and this one also doesn't matter, but because we're going for delighted, not tormented. But you could basically sit here and do this ability and switch the rune to this one to where you only need to cast it 5 times to trigger your effect rune. I don't really know if that's better than just killing enemies. I like the just killing enemies version. You also could go with not ancestral strikes. Could go with time in combat. So somewhere between these three, either 5 ancient skills or 5 support skills, or time in combat. But this is what I landed on. Let's finish out these skills real quick. And the last row doesn't matter because it's just life leech. I mean, I put life leech, so if I'm actually using arrow shot or rain of arrows, sure, but we'll talk about those abilities and they really don't do much damage. So arrow shot, here we go. Not a lot of damage. They also nerfed life leech like a couple days ago, so not a big deal. I go rebound, but it doesn't matter. I also go for pierce chance. Again, doesn't really matter. Sure, it helps arrow shot, but we have like 1 projectile. Well, we get 4 projectiles with this one here. If we're delighted, we have the 25% evasion multiplier, so that's really why we go for this. And then lastly, when we hit an arrow with arrow shot, it refreshes poison. But you could switch to a different main skill if you find something else that works for you. But I felt like it complemented the rain of arrows the most because it's a skill that gives us a benefit with this, and we don't actually ever have to use the skill. So that's the main key here. and we don't use the turret either. So we're only using rain of arrows to pull everything to us. So this makes it to where it's faster. This makes it to where it's larger and pulls them in. This makes it to where it does extra damage, but none of these matter. I just don't want it to do in a line, and I don't want it to repeat, or I don't want it to have reduced area. So I'm not picking that. I'm just picking this one here, but you could really go with none. Doesn't affect your mana cost, so just pick whatever you want. I'm going with crit because, yeah, you want to crit more just to benefit. Well, at one point I was trying to do the Ancestral Strike things like I talked about in the history. So you actually don't need this at all, but it's there. We're not doing much damage, so it's not a big deal. And then lastly, we're doing Delighted, which gives us attack speed up to 25%, or sorry, 25 times, so it's 50% attack speed. Jeez. One other thing I've messed around with Rain of Arrows is using this here, which makes it into LE damage, and you have to 150% increase damage, and that makes it 1.5 mil to 1.8 mil, but it no longer pulls enemies in. So I went for the utility over the damage. If you got inspired and maybe you want to do the same build, but something's different and you want to do damage, you would do the LE damage here. That'd be pretty nice. But anyway, I think that's the build. Does really well, like against everything. You just want to make sure you're delighted when you can, so you get that extra multiplier. You can do everything in the forge. The one thing I would look out for would probably be light beams and I guess ice bombs. I did get one stat of life regen just to counteract the life bombs or any damage I might take. But at the same time, you can just use the Thornbite Rune, get a couple million, and you'll be sitting pretty anyway. Alright, so yeah, even if Thornbite Rune is nerfed, this still has so much defense that it doesn't actually matter. And if the Thornbite Rune even does what it does now, where you get some amount of shield, it's still going to be very nice to use. So we're still going to be looking at it if we need shield in some kind of way. But when they nerf it, maybe we'll do some kind of update and we'll figure it out from there. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this build guide. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I know it's a bit complicated and I was all over the place because there's so many moving pieces, but I wanted to get this build out here. And yeah, next up, we'll be doing a knight build. I'm thinking about like an experience knight, but we'll see. And hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I'll catch you guys next time.